November 21st, 2012. A cruise liner drifts through the waters off the coast of Vancouver, British Columbia. For 43-year-old Shelley from Olympia, Washington, it's a chance to relax and escape the stresses of her daily life. Shelley's husband, Will, has surprised her with a brief but hopefully relaxing vacation. The ship offers a bevy of casinos and entertainment lounges. Though not much of a gambler himself, he figures it's a good opportunity for them to live a little. But what began as a peaceful morning quickly dissolves into a harrowing nightmare at sea. Who could have wanted to harm Shelley? And what motive could they possibly have had? Was it revenge, jealousy, or a murderous impulse that was impossible to ignore? November 21st, 2012. A fun-filled entertainment vessel carrying nearly 1,000 people set sail from Seattle, Washington, on a week-long cruise up the west coast of British Columbia. The voyage is intended to be a fun-filled, carefree journey. But for Shelley and Will, it will be the last time they ever see each other. Shelley is a professor at Washington State University. She's worked tirelessly for years to obtain her PhD in economics, and her profession has dominated much of her life.
When I found out that the couple were from my home state, I felt a real connection right off the bat. She was an academic at the university, and it really piqued my interest and really made me want to find out what was going on.
The couple have a 9-year-old son, Jack, and Will has to bear the bulk of parenting duties. But it doesn't bother him. He loves being a father.
They had a little guy. They were married. They were no longer together. They were living together for convenience.
Shelley and Will actually divorced in March of 2010, but they've opted to continue living together under the same roof for the sake of their son.
Shelley and Will tried something very unusual, really, in that they split up. They couldn't make their marriage work, but they decided to continue living together under one roof for the sake of their son.
Intimate relationships, particularly marriages, require often a delicate balance so that each party gets what they want out of the relationship. Life is complicated, and these two are trying their best to work it out.
Recently, Shelley's work on her PhD has taken an upward swing, at times feeling as though it's consuming all of her free time. Even though their relationship is strained, Will looks for ways to pick up the slack.
Will went in an effort to try to rekindle the relationship, booked a trip for them together.
Hoping to both relieve his wife's stress and rekindle their relationship, Will decides to book them a week-long cruise. The trip will be a welcome distraction for Shelley, one that Will hopes will be his last chance at winning her affection. While she's unsure about Will's intentions, it's just the break that Shelley's been looking for, and she agrees to go, even saying their son can go to her parents' house for the duration of the trip. Will's sudden act of kindness isn't lost on Shelley, but as she begins to pack for the trip, she ponders whether or not he could have an ulterior motive. She suspects that he's still in love with her, but she's always been suspicious of his behavior in the past and believes that he only has himself to blame for their failed relationship.
Trust is the most important thing in any relationship. So once trust has been eroded, you have no chance of making it work. And that's what happened in this case. Shelley was convinced that her husband was having multiple affairs, which he wouldn't admit to, but she just had that feeling that he wasn't being faithful to her. So her suspicions have given her this underlying resentment. It's really hard not to feel resentful towards someone you think is cheating on you. And unfortunately, the only way for her to get rid of that resentment was to end the marriage.
On September 23, 2010, Shelley and Will board a train from their home in Olympia, Washington. It's a 3-hour journey to Seattle, where they board the cruise ship for their final voyage together.
Will booked this cruise, starting from Seattle, going north through British Columbia, Pacific Northwest. Not a long time, but very, very beautiful, scenic route.
It's an unusually sunny day in the Pacific Northwest, one that has the passengers in an even more relaxed and carefree mood. So far, everything is going smoothly for Will. It's an opportunity to set his plan in motion. He takes Shelley by the hand, and they set off to find their cabin and explore the ship. Will's plan to win Shelley's affection appears to be working. He leaves their luggage in the cabin and asks Shelley if she'd like to explore the ship and perhaps have a drink. It's exactly the kind of distraction Shelley needs, and she doesn't want to spoil their vacation worrying about their relationship or her work. After freshening up, the duo head out to explore the ship. It's around this time that Will and Shelley catch the attention of a member of the cleaning crew, a man who takes an immediate interest in the couple.
Members of the crew are supposed to be friendly and polite, but they're not supposed to get close or personally involved with the people on the ship. There's lots of reasons for this: privacy, other concerns. They're supposed to maintain a respectful distance, unless, of course, the passenger wants to talk or open up. Then they have to be polite, but they're still supposed to be fairly hands-off.
The couple opts to grab a drink, trying their best to escape the everyday and embrace their surroundings. As the evening wears on, both Will and Shelley are enjoying some of the gaming aboard the ship. Will can't catch a break, but Shelley is raking the winnings in.
They're not really gamblers. Shelley finds that she's having a lot of luck at the tables. She's winning some money. Will's pretty happy. Things are going well. Everybody's enjoying themselves. Suddenly, this plan is looking like it's going to happen.
Will adores seeing her so carefree and happy. It hasn't been like this in a very long time. As the night wears on, so too does Shelley's luck. She's on the winning streak of her life, and seemingly nothing can stop her. Shelley's the talk of the casino. But her focus shifts away from Will and becomes fixed on the money. Will begins to wonder who this woman is. She doesn't resemble the one he's so desperately trying to win back. And she's caught the attention of a fellow gambler, a man with whom she celebrates every hand and appears to have taken a liking to. As her lucky streak continues, all eyes are on Shelley. With the trip not going as planned, Will opts to indulge himself, annoyed with Shelley's gambling and the attention she's refusing to give him. This was supposed to be his opportunity to win her back, but it appears to be crumbling.
Envy is a very destructive human emotion. really has no purpose other than to make ourselves feel bad. And in this case, unfortunately, you have this poor man who works on this cruise ship. He's always alone. All he sees are these wonderful couples having an amazing time. They have a lot more money than he does. They have a lot more freedom than he does. So it's understandable that he might feel a bit envious towards the people that he's supposed to be serving. Envy can make us do very erratic, unexplainable things that we wouldn't ordinarily do. It can drive us to be quite destructive.
A tired Will returns to the couple's cabin, retiring for the night in a state of defeat. But just a few hours later, both his and Shelley's lives will drastically change forever when the cruise takes a dramatically different direction. Shelley stands at the edge of the railing, deep in thought. It's the first quiet moment she's had since they arrived on board. But the moment is interrupted as Will arrives unexpectedly and wants to talk. Shelley and Will share an intimate moment that could impact the rest of their lives. But they aren't alone. Meanwhile, passenger Linda Stewart enjoys the ocean views on the lower deck when she suddenly hears commotion coming from above. As she tries to get a better look at what's going on, she's immediately disturbed by what she sees. As Shelley falls overboard, Linda races to alert security.
Linda is the first person to report to the crew that a body has gone over the side into the ocean.
Will surprises his ex-wife Shelley with a week-long cruise aboard a modern luxury cruise liner. Although the couple divorced 2 years prior, they continued to live together and raise their son, Jack. Will believes the vacation will help win Shelley's affection once again. He's desperate to have her back. But Will's plan isn't going the way he hoped. Shelley is more interested in a big payday, as well as an excited gambler who's cheering her on. Will has seemingly become a third wheel and can't take it anymore. He leaves and heads to the bar to nurse his sorrows. But his plan quickly begins to unravel, and Shelley is garnering more attention than she bargained for. Less than 24 hours after the ship sets sail, tragedy strikes. After another passenger witnesses a struggle on an upper deck, Shelley falls overboard. Later, security officers find a rambling and incoherent Will wandering the 7th deck. They try to calm him down, but he's sick and looks to be in shock. Something terrible has occurred, and they'll need to clarify what happened while the culprit is still on board. No security footage exists from the deck where Shelley went overboard. The only camera present is out of order at the time of the incident. A work order has been placed to service it at the next port of call. With the frantic search for Shelley underway, security officers question Will. He's visibly shaken and upset, often rambling in his response. When he calms down, Will reveals to the officers that Shelley was dealing with a tremendous amount of stress related to her job. She constantly felt the pressure of her teaching position, despite the fact that she'd strived so hard to achieve it. He says he'd hoped the cruise would allow her an opportunity to put the job aside and relax because she'd recently contemplated suicide due to her stress. He says that he wanted nothing more than to make her happy again.
Will really wants to reveal something to the ship's security, and that is she was actually suicidal and maybe could have jumped overboard.
So throughout the investigation, Will maintains innocence. he starts to bring in factors that he feels regarding Shelley's mental state, that he thinks these factors might have played into what happened to her.
Will tells the officers that he woke in the early hours of the morning and discovered that Shelley was missing. Unnerved by this, and perhaps ashamed that he'd left her at the casino while she was enjoying her winning streak, he dresses and goes to look for her. Will states that, while looking for Shelley, he spots her leaning over the railings of the deck. He's worried that she's about to go through with her plan of taking her own life. He runs out to her in an attempt to stop her. This is the love of his life and the mother of his child. He'll do anything to save her.
He finally reveals that his intention was to get back together with her all along. She doesn't feel that way, and how she reacts to that when she may have had other ideas about what she was going to do on this cruise with thousands of other people, that could potentially lead to major problems.
As Will pours his heart out to Shelley, the cleaning staff employee watches them from a distance. He's strangely fascinated by the dynamic between the couple and the ebb and flow of their complex relationship. The employee casually strolls past the couple, catching their attention momentarily before moving out of sight.
Is it a coincidence that this man always seems to be around them, or has he taken too much of an interest in her? Is this stalkerish behavior? It's hard to say, but he's worth taking another look at.
Will states that after revealing his true intentions to Shelley, she isn't interested in getting back together. She's only living with Will because of their son Jack, and believes it's in his best interest that he have both parents under one roof. But she's struggling to cope, and she needs his help to ensure that her mental health is as strong as it can be. Will states that he understands and wants nothing more than to see her happy, be it with or without him. But as Will and Shelley appear to have finally settled the terms of their relationship and a way to move forward, it's less than an hour later that tourist Linda Stewart witnesses the most horrific sight she's ever seen, one that will linger with her for the rest of her life. Shelley and her ex-husband, Will, are on board a luxury cruise liner off the coast of British Columbia, Canada. The trip was a surprise for Shelley, who has been stressed at work, but Will has an ulterior motive. He wants to win her love again and get remarried. But it soon becomes clear that Shelley has no interest in Will anymore. Of course, that doesn't stop others on board from taking an interest in her. A few hours later, Shelley has gone overboard, and security officers scramble to find suspects.
Well, when you have an incident like this where one of the parties of a marriage, especially a failed marriage, goes missing or is murdered, the spouse is often considered a person of interest. They generally have the most to gain from this person no longer being in their life. Either there's a financial gain, or maybe there's just an emotional component to it where they can't deal with the stress of the failed relationship any longer.
Security officers delve into Will's relationship with Shelley and how it went south. Will says that Shelley was mentally unstable and emotionally fragile throughout their relationship. She constantly accused him of having affairs, and there was a lack of trust in their marriage that simply couldn't be repaired. As investigators probe deeper, Will states that after a trip to the casino deck the previous night, he knew that their relationship would never be the same. She didn't seem even remotely interested in him and was fixated on winning as much money as she possibly could. But something went wrong after Will left her at the craps table. Something that caused Shelley to come to him in the middle of the night and beg for a loan.
At some point during the evening, Shelley's luck is turned. As most casinos, house always wins.
Will tells the officers that he refused to give her any money unless she told him what it was for. Shelley becomes enraged with him, muttering that it's pointless to live this way. At that point, she leaves the cabin.
So Shelley makes it back to the casino, scrapes together everything she's got, whatever change she has, and tries to win back her losses.
As Will sleeps, Shelley is desperately trying to reclaim her winnings, but it's looking increasingly bleak. Just as Shelley believes all hope is lost, a new source of hope arrives from an unlikely companion, someone who's taken a deep-seated interest in her.
So what we know now is that a gambler, a male patron, actually went up to Shelley, gave her some chips in an effort to not only win back what she lost, maybe make her feel a little bit better about the evening.
People don't often give us something for nothing, so you have to wonder what this fellow's motives are. For him to have given her poker chips, there seems like there was something that he was hoping to get in return.
Will states that he awakens hours later and notes that Shelley still hasn't returned. That's when he dresses and ventures to find her. Elsewhere on the ship, Shelley is on the move too. She flees the gambler's room in a hurry, leaving him in a drunken fury. Will tells investigators that he couldn't stand to see Shelley in such a vulnerable state and feared that she would go through with her plan of taking her own life. He says he'll do anything just to get through the trip and even agrees to give her the loan that she so desperately wanted hours earlier, no questions asked. He tells her that he understands their romance is dead, but their son needs his parents, and he'll do anything he can to ensure young Jack has them in his life. It's a tender moment between the former lovers, but unbeknownst to them, they aren't alone. Will states that an employee can confirm their whereabouts on the ship that morning, but he also begins to ponder whether this man could have had something to do with his wife's disappearance.
Well, when you're speaking with a person of interest, or a suspect for that matter, who is very quick to point out somebody else as having been involved, detectives or investigators need to be cognizant of the fact that they may be trying to deflect from their own involvement in the matter. If this person is pointing to other possible suspects and the motives may be plausible, then it all needs to be investigated.
Security officers ask Will to point out the employee he claims to have seen the night before. Will watches the tape and immediately spots the man he states was also watching them on deck in the early hours of the morning. But as he reviews the footage, he has another thought. Question the gambler who Shelley celebrated with during her winning streak at the craps table. Will believes this man could also be responsible for Shelley's disappearance. Security tracks the mysterious gambler to his cabin, where he is questioned about the events of the night before. The man confirms that he did in fact spend time gambling with Shelley that evening, but denies any knowledge as to her whereabouts, stating that he retired to his cabin in the early hours of the morning and has been asleep until the officer so rudely awakened him just then. security officials believe there's something he's not telling them and detain him for further questioning. Security also detains the employee that Will pointed out on the monitor. The worker states that he did indeed see Shelley and Will several times throughout the course of the night, but denies any knowledge as to her whereabouts. In fact, he hadn't even heard that there'd been an emergency when he started his shift that morning.
Without any other evidence, time becomes of the essence because this information can disappear quickly. Witnesses forget what they saw. They may be difficult to track down later on, so they really need to get on this quickly.
But as security officers question their suspects on board the ship, a Marine officer's search reveals a heartbreaking discovery, one that may well contain the answer about what really happened on board the cruise ship just hours before. Will takes his ex-wife Shelley on a cruise to hopefully win her back. After Shelley's gambling at the casino, Will starts to feel as though his plan is a lost cause, and so he heads to bed. Meanwhile, sometime in the night, tragedy strikes, and a passenger spots a brief struggle on an upper deck before Shelley falls overboard into the ocean below. Security questions Shelley's husband Will, and he quickly identifies two possible suspects. A gambler who had befriended Shelley at the craps table, and an employee of the ship who, Will states, took a strange interest in the couple during their short voyage. But with neither suspect offering insight as to what happened to Shelley, officials on the beach hope that her body might hold the clues that can lead them to the truth.
So cruise ships are huge vessels. They're many stories high. So falling from a passenger deck of a cruise ship would be like falling from a 10-story building and hitting the concrete. It's likely going to be fatal.
It's not that much later that the Coast Guard is able to find Shelley's body and quickly begin an investigation.
With news of Shelley's body being recovered reaching the ship, security officers begin to question their trio of suspects. Officers first question the gambler, who admits that he spent time with Shelley the night before, but left her at the casino before retiring to bed. They're suspicious of his claims and continue to press forward for more details. The gambler reveals that Shelley seemed desperate for money after losing her windfall that night. He states that he took pity on her and offered her a few more chips in the hopes of getting her winning streak going.
So our Good Samaritan casino patron actually has Shelley return to his cabin with him. They go in together, but very shortly, security tapes reveal that she left and he stayed.
He then states that his intentions weren't altruistic. The gambler states that Shelley rejected his advances and left his room. He pondered following her, but was already feeling the effects of his excessive drinking that night and opted instead to go to sleep. Upon review of the security camera footage in the hallway outside of the gambler's room, officers are able to confirm his alibi, and he is released from custody. Next, they turn their attention to the employee, who Will claims took an unusually keen interest in the couple from the moment they first arrived. Investigators consider the employee a person of interest for questioning.
The report said that he was giving some unwanted attention to Shelley.
The employee agrees that he did see both Shelley and Will several times over the course of the day. He states that he recalls them initially arriving on the ship, looking content and excited for what was to come. But he goes on to state that he only became more aware of them after seeing Will storm off from a craps table where Shelley was on a winning streak and embracing another man. The employee states that Will looked completely embarrassed after being rebuffed by Shelley. But why such a fascination with the couple? Security officers believe there's more to the employee's story. The employee states that he was surprised to see the same couple again, but expected that things would be quite heated between them, and they were. He tells officers that Will was begging her to take him back and that he'd do anything for her. Shelley wasn't interested, though, and Will looked as though his heart had been ripped from his chest.
Relationships are very complicated, especially when you have someone who's fighting an allegation he believes is untrue. As far as Will is concerned, he wasn't unfaithful, and he's so frustrated that his marriage is coming to an end because of something he didn't even do.
The employee states that he felt sorry for Shelley, but she seemed to be able to handle Will. But thinking back, there was a deeply aggressive side to him that made him rather nervous. The more the employee opens up, the more suspicious the officials become of him. They need to confirm his alibi, but they ponder whether or not the man could be their killer. Perhaps, through his ever-watchful eye, he saw a vulnerable woman that he opted to prey upon. Feeling uncomfortable, the employee requests that the officers speak with his roommate, who can confirm that he returned to their cabin well prior to the time the emergency was reported.
A suspect is someone who you're fairly certain has the motive and opportunity to commit a crime. A person of interest, rather, would be somebody more on the periphery who may have information about what occurred. Now, a person of interest can certainly become a suspect, but often they turn into witnesses.
After speaking with the employee's roommate, officers are able to confirm his alibi. This leaves them with one final suspect in Shelley's death: Will. Security officers have cleared 2 suspects in the death of Shelley, who was thrown overboard from her cruise liner off the coast of British Columbia, Canada, after a tumultuous night of gambling and emotional outbursts. Now only one suspect remains, and the officers must amp up their efforts to press him for answers surrounding his knowledge of Shelley's death.
Very quickly, word gets back to the ship. Shelley's body's been found. Security team on the boat step in and start re-questioning Will.
The officers bring Will in for another round of questioning, but this time with a much more aggressive approach in the hopes that he'll change his story. Sure enough, he cracks.
Interrogations are very intense interactions between people, and there's pressure on both sides. The investigator feels an intense pressure to solve a crime, to get a person to confess. The person who is being interviewed feels intimidated by the fact that they're locked in a room with a person intently questioning them with a view to maybe convicting them of a crime. They may be innocent, but yet they'll come across nervous and may have all the appearances of somebody who's done something wrong.
Will reveals that he did, in fact, throw Shelley overboard from the ship following an emotional discussion about their future. But there's a catch. He states that he was purely following her wishes.
During the argument, Will says that Shelley confesses that she wants to commit suicide. and have a burial at sea.
Will states that after awakening in the middle of the night and discovering that Shelley wasn't in her room, he goes to look for her. When he finds her, she's ready to leap to her death from the railings of their deck. He races to her, grabs her, and tries to pull her back to talk some sense into her. But Shelley resists, and a struggle ensues. She wants to leap to her death, and he'll do anything to save her, but she's a more powerful force than he imagined.
There was a struggle. Shelley falls back, hits her head not once, but twice. As she's lying there, Will checks her for a pulse. He says there was no pulse and that she was dead.
Will states that he panics in that moment and knows it was an accident, but also that his wife wanted nothing more than to finally see her life come to an end. He fears that his son will be left without a parent if he goes to jail, and believes there's only one thing left that he can do to avoid that happening. He must dump Shelley's body overboard, and in doing so, honor her wishes.
Will claims to fulfill her final wishes, puts the body over the rail, and provides her with her burial at sea.
For security officers, this is a shocking revelation. But there are still more questions to be asked. They believe that Will might still be hiding something from them, something that can lessen the charges against him. As the ship returns to port, Will is arrested and charged with Shelley's murder. He is promptly arraigned and set to appear in court 3 days later. Will is adamant that Shelley's death was purely an accident and that he never intended to harm her. He states repeatedly that he was in love with her and the entire point of the trip was to win back her affection. Thus, why would he possibly kill her? Ultimately, he was doing what any good father would do in that moment, trying to protect his son. As his lawyer clarifies what the charges are, Will resigns himself to a potentially lengthy trial where he will be forced to relive the tragedy again and again. In the hopes of avoiding this, he pleads guilty to the charge of manslaughter. But enough suspicion surrounds the incident and Will's claims about what happened that the case goes to trial. And Will is charged with murder. Will has been charged in the death of his wife, Shelley, who was found dead off the coast of British Columbia, Canada, after falling overboard from their cruise liner. Despite Will's claim that he didn't intend to harm her and was merely honoring her wishes and trying to protect their son when he dumped her body, investigators believe there's more to the story than Will is telling them. The case goes to trial.
Because these ships are so huge and it's such a long distance to the water, cruise ships provide safety railing and other physical barriers to do their best to prevent a responsible person from going over the rail inadvertently. So the autopsy results showed that she drowned as opposed to died from trauma associated with hitting the water.
The pathologist finds that the injuries that occurred to Shelley happened before she fell overboard, and then also found that she died from drowning, which means that she was still alive before they threw her overboard.
So Will is adamant, once he realizes Shelley is dead, that he has to protect his son. Up until the trial, Will maintains that he was always in love with Shelley and that her death was purely accidental.
The fact that they determined she drowned would indicate she was breathing when she hit the water, which is how the water would get into her lungs. The localized injuries we see here were limited to her arms and her face. It's unlikely that only her arms and face would sustain injuries in the event of a fall off the deck.
Anyone who falls onto water from that height is going to have some kind of trauma to their body, whether it's broken bones, bruising. But when it came to this case, the trauma she had seemed like it had occurred before she fell overboard. Water in the lungs is a definite sign that she was alive when she was thrown overboard.
The pathologist's findings are concrete, clearly implicating Will in Shelley's death. The jury has no choice but to convict.
Will tries to plead to a lesser charge of manslaughter. This is rejected by the court. Will claims that he did all of it to ensure that his son had at least one parent. The biggest hole in Will's plan was that Shelley wasn't dead before she went over the rail. In the end, Will's found guilty on all charges.
What's especially tragic about this case is it was supposed to be this wonderful moment to draw two people back together, not just for the sake of their child, but for the love they once had, and instead it ended up tearing them apart.
Shelley's dedication to her career, as well as her suspicions of Will's infidelity, ultimately caused a rift between them that led to divorce. But their commitment to their son was unwavering and offered them hope for a brighter future.
People are complicated. Relationships are very difficult, even in the best circumstances. In this case, you have a man who feels wronged, who feels like he's being unfairly accused of something that he feels he didn't do. Whether he did it or not, we'll never know. There's still lots of unanswered questions about this case. But what we do know is he definitely showed his true colors in the end.
Will's surprise cruise should have been an opportunity to rekindle his relationship with Shelley. But instead, his actions aboard the ship erased their future together, tragically ending in Shelley's death and changing his son's life forever.